Smarter, better to drive, more efficient and with lots more space, the second generation Mercedes B-Class looks to be made of the right stuff. More versatile than a family hatch, less frumpy than a 5-door mini-MPV, it's an interesting and high-quality choice for smaller families.
Mercedes has always struggled to build compact, affordable cars that feel like, well, a Mercedes. You tried an original A or B class and thought it nicely built, but not quite special enough. Ultimately, a very expensive way to buy a very expensive badge. And that was a problem. Executives, you see, rarely question the three-pointed star price premium in their large, smart saloons and SUVs. It's necessity obvious every time they ease behind the wheel. Without that extra class, choosing one of this brand's smaller models just seemed like a colossally costly way of buying what in essence was a fairly ordinary family hatchback. The suits from Stuttgart knew it, and in response invested more than ever before in a new, more Merc-like generation of compact models. This is one of them, the second generation B-Class, which arrived here in the early spring of 2012. No model change in the history of this marque has ever seen the introduction of so many developments at once. Everything from the platform it sits on to the power plants that drive it have been re-engineered, along with class-leading safety, a sharper chassis and high-tech equipment. And yes, we're promised a proper premium feel this time round from what is the brand's second stab at what it calls its sports tourer. As for what exactly one of those might be, well, you can get a feel for the answer at first glance. Here's a car that's obviously more practical and versatile than your average Golf or Focus-sized family hatchback, but not as frumpy and high-set as a 5-seater C-Max or Scenic-like mini-MPV. It's the Mercedes take on compact, upwardly mobile motoring for a compact, upwardly mobile family. And we're going to test it. Approach this car as an MPV customer and you'll notice one thing very early on. There's no raised driving position. Now, to be honest, I'd always wondered why small people carriers had to have this anyway, as apparently did the Mercedes design team. As a result, in this second generation B-Class, drivers will find themselves sitting 86mm closer to the road in a driving position, much like that of any Golf or Astra family hatch. Jump from this car into a Scenic or a C-Max and it'll feel like you're steering from the sky. So it'll be just like any ordinary family hatch to drive then? Well, yes and no. Let's start with the no. Despite this Mark II model's lower centre of gravity and torque vectoring braking system that helps it turn more directly into corners, it isn't as responsive on the twisty stuff as a Ford Focus or even a Volkswagen Golf. But then I doubt whether too many potential owners of this model will be looking to corner it on its door handles. As the sports tourer tag that this B-Class carries might suggest, this is a car that's been developed to handle well on fast flowing roads, and of course it'll cruise quietly all day on the highway. In fact, if I absolutely had to undertake a cross-continental journey in a compact car of this kind, I can't think of any model that I'd rather choose. But you'll be keener to know how this car will feel on the school run or on a trip to collect your dry cleaning. The answer will depend a little on whether you've resisted the temptation to opt for a lower, stiffer, sport-trimmed model and or a set of larger 18-inch alloy wheels. Both will affect the ride quality that for me makes this car's road-going experience as classy as its fit and finish. This is not an inherently sporting car, and personally I can't really see the point of specifying it as such. Around town it certainly feels manoeuvrable, helped by a tight turning circle courtesy of the more compact engine and gearbox installation. To really get a feeling for this car's modestly powered remit, you've only to look at the mainstream engines on offer, a petrol 1.6 and a diesel 1.8. Now here I'm trying the entry-level petrol, the B180, which has a modest 122 brake horsepower to call upon, good enough to get it from rest to 60 in 10.4 seconds on the way to a top speed of 118 miles an hour. Now this same unit has also been tuned to 156 brake horsepower in the B200 petrol model, which is able to get from rest to 60 in 8.6 seconds on the way to a top speed of 137 miles an hour. It's probably better though if you can afford the price premium to stretch to one of the 1.8 litre diesel models. Now, the entry-level B180 CDI's 109 brake horsepower may sound a bit feeble, but it's got enough pulling power, 250 Newton meters of torque, to match the fastest of the mainstream petrol variants. And with a quick tweak to the ECU, Mercedes can bring you the same engine in 136 brake horsepower guise in the form of the B200 CDI, and that's a car capable of getting from rest to 60 in 9.5 seconds on the way to a top speed of 130 miles an hour. Now, all of this grunt is marshalled through a sweet shifting 6-speed manual gearbox, but a Mercedes wouldn't be a Mercedes without the rather better option of an automatic, in this case a 7-speed 7G DCT transmission that's one of those clever dual clutch affairs that selects the next gear before you've even left the last one. Now, if you'd removed the front grille and badge work from an original first generation B-Class model, you'd have been left with a shape that could have been made by just about anyone. This second generation design, in contrast, has much more of a brand-based identity to it. For a start, compared to this car's CD factor of just 0.26, most other family hatchbacks and MPVs are about as wind-cheating as the average garden shed. The differences are down to the detail, with small but significant touches like serrated wheel arch spoilers. High-tech compensation, perhaps, for the fact that under the skin, this car is actually less revolutionary than its predecessor. To improve its structural rigidity, that car had a theoretically very clever double floor that Mercedes now admits wasn't a very good idea, compromising as it did the driving position and the cabin versatility. Now, without it, this second generation design crouches almost 5 centimetres lower to the road than its predecessor, with a more agile, sporting demeanour emphasised by its signature styling flourish, this blade-like crease that flows diagonally upwards through the rear doors to the tail lamps. Inside, the lower roofline hasn't translated into less headroom. In fact, there's actually a bit more, something you especially notice here at the back, where there's potentially more legroom than you get in a £70,000 Mercedes S-Class saloon. Now, that's if you paid extra for the Easy Vario Plus system, whereby the bench here can slide up to 140mm backwards or forwards to prioritise either rear passenger space or room for luggage behind you. Which is all well and good if there are only 2 of you back here. A third adult, though, isn't going to be very comfortable at all, perched as he or she must be on a middle seat that isn't really a seat at all. Instead, it's really a raised section of upholstery linking the 2 outer chairs. And worse, this car's front-driven layout hasn't prevented the need for a raised transmission tunnel-shaped intrusion, robbing the centre seat occupant of precious legroom. In summary, it's easy to see why Mercedes doesn't want us to call this an MPV. With what is essentially carriage capacity for 4 people, that might leave them something to answer for under the Trades Descriptions Act. Yet the luggage room on offer is very MPV-like, even if the 488 litres that you get is slightly down on that offered by the previous generation B-Class model. It's slightly more than you get in a Ford C-Max mini-MPV, for example, and about 50% more than you'd have to put up with in an ordinary Focus or Golf-sized family hatch. And if you've opted for the Easy Vario Plus seat sliding package, you can slide the rear bench forwards and increase your capacity to 666 litres, theoretically, without chucking any rear seat passengers out. Now, if you've got longer items to carry, the Easy Vario Plus package also includes a ski hatch, so you can poke the items through the middle of the rear bench. Flatten the 60/40 split folding rear seat and you free up 1,545 litres of total space. If that's insufficient and you've opted for the Easy Vario Plus package, you get a fold flat front passenger seat so that you can get longer items in like mountain bikes or surfboards. And if you've got valuables that you want to keep away from prying eyes, there's an under boot floor compartment to put those in. Which is all very worthy. But now for the best bit. Get behind the wheel and it's pretty hard to think of any sub £25,000 family car that feels as good as this one when you slide into the driver's seat. From the three-dimensional fascia finish to the SLS supercar style air vents, from the grippy three-spoke leather covered steering wheel to the iPad style colour info screen, either 5.8 or 7 inches in size, that sits on top of the dash. It's a beautifully conceived cabin. Sitting here, you reason that of course a Ford C-Max is cheaper. So is a Marks and Spencer suit compared to an Armani, but which would you rather have? It's this interior that will really sell this car. And it's a practical cabin too. You've got the usual cup holders, nooks and crannies for all the smaller bits. You've got door pockets big enough to actually store things in, like a couple of bottles, and a glove box that's large enough for all the bits and bobs that inevitably go with family motoring. There's a USB connection point and an iPod socket nicely concealed in this centre storage box rather than unpleasantly displayed on the dash. Korean brands take note. And the usual 12-volt charging point as well. But practical touches like these aren't what you'll take away from first impressions inside this car. Instead, it's the way that every switch, button and lever operates with the kind of solidity suggestive of a model that will outlast you. It is, in every way, a proper Mercedes experience. Now, whether you come to this car comparing it to a Focus-size family hatchback or a C-Max or Scenic-style 5-seat mini-MPV, you'll be expecting to have to find a reasonably significant premium over the cost of a mainstream rival. Which is broadly correct, though the premium might not be quite as great as you may think. Pricing in the £21,000 to £26,000 bracket means that you're looking at probably £3,000 to £4,000 more than you'd pay for an equivalent version of a typical and far less versatile Focus or Astra style car. If you're comparing to something more MPV-ish, a C-Max or a Scenic style model, then the premium for this Mercedes is probably £2,000 to £3,000 more. Raise the bonnet on your chosen B-Class model, either 1.6 litre petrol, as in this case, or 1.8 litre diesel, and it's a bit of a surprise to find a cheap metal rod support rather than proper gas struts, but that apart, almost everything you'd expect is in evidence in terms of equipment. So you can find alloy wheels, air conditioning and an MP3 compatible stereo right across the range, as well as things like daytime running lights, an active park assist system to get you into the tighter spots, auto headlamps and wipers, a hill holder clutch to stop you drifting backwards on uphill junctions, and the usual power windows and mirrors. I wouldn't necessarily recommend you pay extra for a stiffer, lower sport trim model like this one. Sport models get these larger 18-inch alloy wheels, but if you do, you'll get lowered sport suspension, sharper direct steer steering, man-made Artico leather upholstery, privacy glass bi-xenon headlamps, sport seats, run-flat tyres, and a colour reverse parking camera. And there's plenty of high-tech too if you tick the right boxes. The Command online multimedia system that you view via this central screen here can display a lot more than sat-nav, though when it comes to that there is a choice of two systems tailored to different budgets. So via this screen you can find yourself looking at a Google local search with weather function, browsing the web or connecting to various online mobile devices. Now when it comes to other options, well, for my kids I'd want to specify the integrated fold-out child seats. For me, I'd want the brilliant quality Harman Kardon surround sound system. And then of course you've got to allow an extra £600 for the Easy Vario Plus package that gives you the sliding rear seats, the ski hatch and the fold flat front passenger seat, though to my mind that really should be standard, and I'd be telling my dealership that were I in price negotiation. As for safety provision, well, here's another area where this car really is class leading. There are 7 airbags, including a window bag, a driver's knee bag, and specially developed pelvis bags that cover not only the pelvis, but the entire upper part of the body. Rear side bags are optional, but Isofix child seat fastenings and all the usual electronic driving aids are standard across the range. But some of this, at least, you'd expect from a Mercedes of this kind. Here's how this B-Class, though, has moved things on in this respect. First, let's talk about collision prevention assist. Now, this is a radar-based system that's standard across the B-Class range, and it is basically there to lower the chance of you rear-ending a car in front. If the system thinks you're about to hit something, then it'll issue both visual and acoustic warnings, as well as priming the brakes, so that they respond instantly when you hit the pedal. Next up is Pre-Safe, a system originally developed for the brand's high-end luxury models that senses when an accident is inevitable, then primes the car accordingly to give you the maximum chance of surviving the crash, instantly, for example, closing the sunroof and the electric windows. Now, to help reduce the chance of that terrible eventuality actually happening, there's another standard feature across the range, Attention Assist. Here, the systems monitor your driving reactions throughout a journey and are able to detect signs of fatigue, then prompting you to stop for a restorative coffee. And if you want to go further, there are plenty of other safety-conscious features on the options list. Blind Spot Assist will stop you dangerously pulling out to overtake in front of another car. Lane Keeping Assist will stop dozy drivers from veering out of their lanes on the highway. Speed Limit Assist will pick up speed limit signs and display them on the dash as you drive. Active Headlamp Assist is able to automatically dip your headlamps for you in the face of oncoming traffic at night. And Distronic Plus will keep you a safe distance from the car in front on the motorway. Now, as you'd expect from the redeveloped engine lineup, running costs have been kept firmly in check in this second generation B-Class lineup. The sleek 0.26 CD drag factor helps here, as does the efficient electromechanical power steering. But the most significant contributory factor in this case is the start-stop system that cuts the engine when you don't need it, when you're stuck in urban traffic or waiting at the lights. Now, the result of all this is that both petrol 1.6 litre models return the same 144 grams per kilometre CO2 figure, and the entry-level B180 manages 47.9 miles to the gallon on the combined cycle, a figure that falls to 45.3 miles to the gallon if you go for the B200. But of course, it's the diesels that perform best on the balance sheet. Both 1.8 litre CDI units managed to return the same combined cycle fuel figure of 64.2 miles to the gallon. In terms of CO2, the B200 CDI manages 121 grams per kilometre, a figure that falls to a more impressive 115 grams per kilometre if you go for the B180 CDI. Now, if you want to do better than that, then you'll need to keep talking to your Mercedes dealership about the hybrid and fuel cell powertrains that have also been developed for this model. What else might you need to know? Insurance groups? Well, they range between 15 and 26 for mainstream variants. And residual values? Well, they weren't stellar in Mark I versions of this B-Class, but this second generation model's improved quality should make sure that it achieves a much greater slab of its original value when the time comes to sell. Ferrying the family around isn't something that most of us especially look forward to, but Mercedes doesn't see why it shouldn't be. In this second generation B-Class, the Stuttgart maker has made big strides forward in terms of engine efficiency, safety and high-tech driving aids. Its real importance, though, is in proving its maker capable of delivering Mercedes quality to the mainstream. True, it isn't perfect. Whether the alternatives you're considering are plusher versions of family hatchbacks or 5-seater mini-MPVs, you'll find sharper handling rivals out there and many that can offer more rear seat passenger space. I have a feeling, though, that few potential buyers of this Mercedes will be put off by these issues. These people will recognise in this second generation model the car the B-Class should always have been. A car that nobody but Mercedes could have built.